Given the function f of x equals 2x cubed minus 5 on the interval of x goes from -2 to +3, we want to determine the domain of the inverse function. So our given function is a cubic function. So I put a graph from Desmos up there on the side. So it's one that we should be able to picture since it's one of our toolkit functions. Cubic functions are our S-shaped curves. The -5 has shifted everything down 5 units and the 2 has stretched it out vertically. So normally for our cubic function, the domain would be all real values and the range would also be all real values. But here we have a restricted domain for our given function. We're told that we're only looking from x equals -2 to x equals +3. So we're only considering that section of the original graph, and we're just finding the inverse then of that restricted domain original function. So one thing to keep in mind is if you know the domain of the original function, you know the range of the inverse function. If you know the range of the original function, then you know the domain of the inverse. So the way that I'm going to find the domain of the inverse is actually to find the range of the original function. So we can see here looking at our cubic function that it's an increasing function. And so the lowest output is going to be when I evaluate my function at -2, and my highest output is going to be at +3. So let's evaluate our function. So I'm going to find f of -2. So I'm going to plug in 2 times -2 cubed minus 5. So we've got 2 times -8 minus 5, which gives us -21. If I do the same thing with 3, f of 3 is 2 times 3 cubed minus 5. So 2 times 27 minus 5, we've got 49. So for our original function f of x that we were given, the domain of this function goes from -2 to 3, the restrictions that we were given. And we can now see that the range goes from -21 to +49. So without actually even coming up with the formula for the inverse function, I'm just going to take these two and switch them. So for our inverse function, the domain is going to go from -21 to 49, and the range is going to go from -2 to 3. So without graphing the inverse function, without finding the formula for the inverse function, if we know the domain and the range for the original function, we know because an inverse is related by switching every ordered pair, every x, y point on our function, that we can then just switch our domain and range to find the domain and range for our inverse function. So the domain of the inverse function is going to be the interval from -21 to 49. Those values came from the range of our original function.